Welcome to Trichotillomania Bootcamp. This is episode number 6, and today we are continuing to talk about the remission formula. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so welcome back, and today we are going to continue breaking down the remission formula of remission equals awareness plus consequence. Within the last 2 episodes we talked about both the remission and the awareness, and today we are going to break down the element of the consequence for you to have a full formula to be able to apply and get yourself into remission. So let's go. Consequence. First of all, why consequence? Everybody knows that whenever our behavior has an unpleasant consequence, it is less likely to occur in the future, right? This is a very simple behavioral principle. So we're going to use this principle in our remission. Now, the question is, what kind of consequence are we going to devise? And to answer this question, we need to understand the problem. So if you guys remember from episode number 2, we talked about the Trichotillomania problem. We broke it down into biology, stress, and habit, right? And then within the habit, we talked about the positive reinforcement, positive feedback loop, and element of trance, right? These are 3 pieces. You can go back to episode number 2 and check it out. So the consequence has to address these 3 components. It has to address the positive reinforcement, right? And something that is the opposite of positive reinforcement would be punishment, right? Positive reinforcement is something that increases the likelihood of the behavior to happen in the future. Punishment is something that decreases the likelihood of the behavior in the future. So the consequence has to have an element of punishment to it. Now, the second part of the habit is positive feedback loop, which means the more we do something, the more something happens. So in hair pulling, after a while, as we pull in our hair, the process of pulling as and of itself creates more stress because we feel more disempowered, we feel more ashamed, we feel more frustrated because we're not able to control the behavior. So that creates a positive feedback loop of the more we pull our hair, the more negative emotion we experience, and the more hair we pull, and the more negative emotion we experience, and the more hair we pull. So this is the positive feedback loop. So in the consequence, there has to be an element of stress reduction, right? Something that will be soothing and will prevent that feedback loop from occurring. And the third part of the trance of trichotillomania, right? The consequence has to break the element of trance. So which means it has to be energizing. It has to make us move, breathe, shift our posture, right? So the consequence has to break the 3 pillars of the habitual behavior of trichotillomania, right, and create a new pattern. So, to summarize, the consequence has to have an element of punishment to it, it has to be stress-reducing process, and it has to be energizing process, right? So this will be the best consequence. And from my experience, the consequence that works for me and seemed like it would be the best choice would be a physical body weight exercise. So the consequence that I chose for my remission was 10 push-ups. So whenever I would have a pulling incident, what I would do, I would get on the floor and pump out 10 push-ups every time. And in the beginning, it was quite exhausting because I basically spent my entire day on the floor. So this was my choice, but you can get creative. You can use anything that is that matches your fitness level. You can use squats, lunges, you can use stretches, right? It does not have to be very labor intensive, but if it makes you move, it makes you breathe, it makes you change your posture, it has an element of chore to it, all of it works. So get creative with creating your own and devising your own consequence for your own remission. Or you can use mine. 10 push-ups definitely work. So for you to help you choose the right consequence, I kind of broke it down into 5 components that you really want to have in your consequence for it to be a good consequence for you. So first of all, it has to be, you have to be able to do it in less than 1 minute, right? So it has to be brief and to the point. Second, you have to be able to do the consequence several times a day, many times a day actually. So this is another important piece. Also, the third part is this consequence, this behavior that you use has to break state, which means you have to get up, you have to move, you have to breathe, you have to get your body going in some way. So it has to break your mental and physiological state of the pulling behavior. You have to shift it into something else. 4, it has to energize your body. Usually what energizes us is breath and movement, right? And finally, the 5th element, it has to feel a little bit like a chore. It doesn't have to be very unpleasant, not at all, but it has to feel a little bit like a chore. After all, we need an element of punishment to it. So when I was, for example, watching TV and I noticed that I was pulling my hair, I would have to get up, break state, disengage from the TV and the show I was watching, do the push-ups. All of it is not something that I wanted to do in the moment, but it's something that created a certain amount of shifting in my physiology, in my mental state, in my body energy. So this is really important. Now, once you find the right consequence for you, right, and it might take a moment, you might want to kind of sit with yourself and consider what are the things that you can do that'll be effective for you to break state, for you to deliver every time you have an incident of hair pulling. Once you choose the consequence that is right for you, the way to implement the entire formula of remission equals awareness plus consequence is very simple. Every time you have a pulling incident, first thing you do immediately is you deliver the consequence. You perform the consequence. In my case, it was 10 push-ups. It has to be done immediately. Now, if you couldn't do it right away because you are driving or you are in a business meeting or whatever the reason you cannot do it right now, you make a mental note that you owe yourself one delivery of the consequence and you do it as soon as you can, right? So this is something that has to be done first. After you do the consequence, you can journal, you can make a note in your TLC journal about the incident, the time, location, context, the TLC, right? And you do it for every single incident. Now, in the beginning of the process, as you are only starting the process of working yourself toward remission, that might be a bit rough for a day or two, maybe a week, right? So you'll find yourself delivering the consequence over and over and over again. Be mentally prepared for it. This is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You're doing everything right. It will take a moment for you to start building up the awareness in your body, your unconscious awareness, your automatic awareness, that whenever your hand is moving toward pulling your hair, you will be alerted with the internal alert that, hey, this is happening. If you don't want to be doing the consequence in a moment, you stop that behavior, right? You'll have a way to track your body in a very different way. You will have very different experience. It's hard to explain without you actually having that experience. And to have this experience right now, I invite you to devise the consequence that is right for you. I hope you have been doing the TLC journal so far because we talked about it last week. So I hope you had a whole week to practice the TLC journaling and notice what are the patterns that you have in your hair pulling. So once you have this awareness and you are using your journal, now you add the consequence and now you can track your progress. And what I expect to happen is that within the next few weeks, your incidents, your pulling incidents will be down to 0, right? I want you guys to give yourself a frame of 4 weeks, right? First week might be labor intensive. Second one, a bit less labor intensive. Third might be easier. Fourth might be surprisingly easy. So give yourself that frame of 4 weeks that I'm working on my remission. I'm applying my remission formula religiously every single time. It has to be my very priority, and see how your behavior changes so very soon, right? So I invite you to test it out. Don't believe me. I want you to try it for yourself and see how it works for you. Now, if you have new creative ideas about consequences that work for you, please put them in the comments. I really am curious to see how you guys go about being creative and devising the consequence that works for you, and kind of for us to share more ideas. If you like this video, like, comment, share with people that might benefit from the material. And next episode, we'll talk about something completely different. Stay tuned.